In this video, we're going to be talking about the brand new Chorus Fire, a pickleball paddle that is going to be great for some, but not so great for others. So stick around to find out which category you fall into. And as always, Chorus did send me these paddles, but they aren't paying for this review, and they don't get to see it before it goes live. And if you want to get a discount on the Chorus Fire or any other paddle while helping this channel grow, you can use the code PICKLEBALLBLAST for 10% off. We'll dive into all the details in just a little bit, but if you're just here for an overview, I've got you. The Chorus Fire is a completely new line of pickleball paddles from Chorus, who also makes the Shapeshifter, the Super Court, and a few others. It comes in their three new shapes, the SX, HX, and EX, and is marketed as their power paddle in comparison to their other lineups, utilizing both its wider cell core and its layers of both fiberglass and carbon polyester weave to deliver that power. It is definitely on the lighter side, which has its pros and cons, and most people, myself included, would recommend adding weight to this paddle to make it more enjoyable to play with. And if you're here for an in-depth review, let's get into it, starting with the basics. And given the three different shapes, I'm going to talk about the stats on the HX, as that was my preferred shape, but afterwards I'll show the stats for the other two shapes briefly. The Chorus Fire HX is a 14mm hybrid-shaped thermoform body that has a surface made up of carbon polyester and fiberglass layers, which they list as carbon polyglass on their site. The advertised static weight is 7.8 ounces, a swing weight of 113, and a twist weight of 6.4. The grip length is 5.6 inches, the circumference is 4.25 inches, it uses a wide cell honeycomb core, and costs $153 after discount. And as promised, here are the subtle differences in stats for the Fire EX and for the Fire SX. Feel free to pause to read through those if you'd like. With those out of the way, I want to dive into a handful of relevant categories that I think you should keep in mind when considering a new paddle. And then we're going to do a recap on the pros and cons of this paddle, who it's made for, and again, who it's specifically not made for. Let's start with power, and I think the power is solid but not overbearing on this paddle. While it's marketed as their power line, Chorus is careful to mention that they don't consider it a pure power paddle, as in, it's not supposed to be power at the cost of everything else. So let's call it an all-court paddle leaning towards power. This will not hit as hard as the Ripple or the Gearbox or anything like that, and I'm just fine with that. Now, I didn't use a radar gun to test my serve speeds yet, but if I had to guess based on the speeds I've registered with some other paddles, how those felt in comparison to these, and the numbers that I've seen posted from some others, I would bet my serve speeds would average around 54 miles per hour or so, with some high serves in the upper 50s. I also want to note that I played a few sessions with this paddle stock, and then a few games with some weight added, and there were some noticeable changes, which you will see becoming a common theme in this video. The changes weren't as big on the power side, but I did feel a bit more power with that additional weight on the paddle. Now let's talk about the feel of this paddle, specifically out of the box without any weight added to it. And you should be sure to listen to this whole section because it's important. In that raw form, it's lacking in my opinion. It feels very stiff and unpredictable, which led to a lot of inconsistency in my resets and soft game especially. There's a lot of vibration when hitting with this paddle, and really all of those stem at least somewhat from how light these paddles are. On the flip side, with 9 grams of weight added to the paddle, which brought my static weight from 7.76 ounces to 8.07 ounces, there was a world of difference. I mentioned the increase in power a bit, but the main goal of this weight was for that stability and consistency, and it really made this paddle much more playable. The vibrations and inconsistencies were not as noticeable, and in a lot of ways it felt like this is kind of the way the paddle should have been released, which I'm going to talk about more in just a bit. The theme will be similar in the control side, which ties into the feel of the paddle. Pretty much every shot felt better with weight added. I felt like the more predictable feel led to more consistent shots and let me feel more confident in the control side of my game. And the sweet spot is fine in its stock form, but it's even better with some weight. On to pop, and I really like playing with poppy paddles. And to me, the Fire would definitely categorize as a poppy paddle. I feel like it's not the most pop that I've played with, but it's up there, and I did like that aspect of the paddle. I feel like if you're someone who doesn't love poppy paddles, or maybe feels like that pop sometimes gets you in trouble, it might be a bit of an adjustment, but it's not a paddle with crazy uncontrollable pop that you can't get used to. I didn't specifically test the spin yet for this paddle, but it didn't stand out to me as being super far in one direction or the other. I could definitely shape my shots when I wanted to, so I'd say it's safe to say the spin is totally usable. You should be able to do everything you need to with that spin. The speed of the Chorus Fire is pretty fast, and in some ways it's nice to have good power and pop while also being quick at the net. However, as I mentioned, the stock paddle with no weight added comes with some drawbacks, so if you do add weight, you'll also add to the swing weight, which will slow the paddle slightly, depending on how much you add and where. And the final category is the visual side, and I really like the look of this paddle. It takes that standard pickleball paddle look, but it builds on it with the nice oversized logo worked into the face, the dark paddle with the white edge guard, the red handle, and the paddle cover, and an interesting feature that I absolutely love, which is the specific paddle that you're using on the end cap. Now that we got a better idea of the performance of this paddle, let's talk about where it excels and falls short. On the positive side, the Chorus Fire offers solid power and pop in a well-designed package and also approaches it with a very customizable mindset. In fact, Matt, the owner of Chorus, intentionally wanted to release these paddles at these light weights to encourage and allow you to weight it up exactly as you want. Instead of starting at, let's say, 8.1 ounces and then weighing up your preferred setup from there, you're given a lot of flexibility by starting below that and building up. On the flip side of that exact same coin though, the Chorus Fire really falls short in a lot of categories if you don't add that weight. Out of the box, there are a lot of vibrations when hitting this paddle, the stability suffers, and I feel like the touch was a bit unpredictable. Now, a lot of this is fixable with that flexibility to add the weight where you like it and dial in the paddle exactly how you want, which is a good transition into the question of who this paddle is for and maybe more importantly, who it's not for. This is a great paddle for someone who likes pop and power, but isn't looking to play with a pure power paddle, and this is an important note, someone who intends to dial in their paddle by adding weight. Similarly, this paddle is not for someone who wants to rip open their package, run to their closest court, and expects to be wowed from the first hit. Now, adding weight isn't complicated, and there's plenty of ways to do it. But even so, for some people, it can be intimidating or honestly just extra work that they don't want to do. So my concern with this paddle isn't so much that it can't be a great paddle for some people, it's that it takes an extra step to get there. And I would imagine that for every person who likes to add weight and dial in their paddles, there are probably 100 people who won't do that. So it almost feels like this paddle was made for paddle nerds and people who love to research and tinker with their paddle. And if that's you, I think you can definitely dial this in exactly how you want it and have a good time playing with it. And if that's not you, again, look, I got through plenty of games without weight, but that process of adding weight is not complicated or time consuming, and I think you'll be much happier if you do so. I hope you found this video helpful. If you have any questions, leave them down below in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.